And today's lesson is on energy systems and their relation to exercise, and it's all about how the body creates energy, and in particular there are 3 different energy systems that help us to do that, and we'll be able to understand what all of those are at the end of this unit. And you'll also know how carbohydrates, fats and proteins are used in the production of energy. So, we need movement we need energy to be able to create movement. We need it to be able to create force against objects. We need it to create heat. We need it to replicate cells in the body. We need it to live. We need it to maintain homeostasis. All of these things that are vital to our survival, not only for us to be healthy, but vital for our survival as human beings, alright? We need energy to be able to do them. So if we couldn't create energy, we'd be in a very, very poor position, and we'd have a very, very poor quality of life. And that's even if we were able to live at all. And energy comes from the food that we eat. The way we convert it in the body, we'll look at a little bit later on, but we need to look at, first of all, where does energy come from? And it comes from the food that we eat, and all of the food that we eat can be measured in calories, alright? And a calorie is a measure of how much energy is in something. So you might think that calories stand for fat, or calories stand for how unhealthy something might be. It's not the case. A calorie is simply how much energy is in that particular product, alright? So something like a chocolate bar will have lots of calories. Something like a lettuce leaf will have hardly any calories. There's hardly any calories in lettuce. There's lots and lots of energy in a chocolate bar, okay? And let's look at it in a bit more depth, okay? We want to look at carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Those are the 3 main food groups where our energy is going to come from. And carbohydrates and proteins, they both have, for every gram of carbohydrate or every gram of protein, you have 4 calories, okay? Fat's a little bit different. For every gram of fat, we have 9 calories. And you can immediately start to see that why people who are eating lots and lots of fats gain weight, because there's so much calories in there, and our body can't use all of those calories in a day or in a week, whatever it might be, and therefore people start to gain fat. And again, let's break it down even more, okay? When we eat carbohydrate, that is stored as glycogen, alright? So it doesn't get stored as carbohydrate, it gets stored as something called glycogen, and it gets stored in our muscles and in the liver, and we'll look a bit more at glycogen later on and the role that plays in energy production. But for now, we need to know that carbohydrates are stored as glycogen, and they're stored in the muscles and they're stored in the liver as well, okay? If we have any excess carbohydrate, so if all of our carbohydrate stores in the body are full, muscles are full and the liver is full, we will store carbohydrate as fat, so we'll convert it into fat and we'll store it as fat. Protein, okay? Protein is stored in the body as amino acids, and the same thing happens. If we have too much protein, it will be stored as fat. So you can see if you're overeating, not only if you're just eating fat, but if you're overeating, then you're going to be gaining more fat. And then we have fats. Fats are stored as fatty acids, and they're stored around the vital organs. So they're inside the body, and they normally get stored around the vital organs. And one more key point to take away from here is carbohydrates and fats. So carbohydrates and proteins can be converted into fats. Alright, so they can be stored in the body. Fat will only ever stay as fat. You can't convert fat into protein and use it for protein. You can't convert fat into carbs and use it for carbs, okay? And all of these different energy sources play different roles in the body, which we'll go at and we'll look at now, and we'll we'll try and look at how these different energy sources can be used for different types of physical activity. But before we can do that, we need to understand that energy in the body comes from a chemical compound called ATP, and that stands for adenosine triphosphate, okay? But we're going to call it ATP for today. So it's adenosine triphosphate, but for us, we know it as ATP. And ATP is the energy currency of the body. The body only recognises ATP, and it's the only thing it can use for energy. The body can't use glycogen for energy. It can't use fat for energy. These things have to go through a process and be converted to ATP so that we can use them to be able to create energy. And as we said right at the start of the presentation, if we couldn't create ATP and if we couldn't make we couldn't create energy in the body, we'd cease to be alive. And let's have a look at what happens here. So the way that we create energy, alright, you can see here we've got ATP. You've got your adenosine molecule in the middle, and you've got 3 phosphate molecules around that one adenosine molecule in the middle. And if we break off one of those phosphate molecules, that's what creates energy in the body. And there's different, very complex chemical processes that will go on to make that happen. But we need to have an availability of ATP to be able to create energy. If we run out of ATP, then we can no longer create energy. There's only a limited amount of ATP within the muscles, and it can only be used for 1 or 2 seconds before we need to start recreating that ATP. Okay, so there's a tiny bit in there, but you know, if we were to work all out for a couple of seconds, that's going to go straight away, and then we need to find different ways to recreate that ATP in the body. And the ways that we can recreate that ATP, we can use the creatine phosphate system, we can use the lactate system, or we can use the aerobic system. And the big takeaway for today is to be able to break down each of those systems and know how they work in the body and what type of activities they can support us to do. And the first one we're going to look at is the creatine phosphate system. And the creatine phosphate system essentially uses phosphate chemical energy, and it makes ATP almost instantly. Okay, so pretty much straight away we can get more ATP in the body, and we use creatine phosphate to do that. However, supply of creatine phosphate is very, very limited as well, and that's why this creatine phosphate system can only be used for something like a sprint, something that happens very, very quickly, very, very explosively, because there's not that much of it there. It doesn't require any fats, any proteins, any carbohydrate to be able to work, and it doesn't have any waste products either. However, the key point to remember with the creatine phosphate system is it's almost instantly gone, pretty much straight away. If we're remaking ATP using the creatine phosphate system, it will pretty much be gone before we've started. And this is the way it works. So as you can see, we've got an ADP molecule there, and in order for that to be able to be used to create energy, it needs to be an ATP. So instead of just having the 2 P's attached to it, it needs to have the 3 P's attached. And all that happens in the creatine phosphate system is the available creatine that we have in the muscles, okay, we'll take one of those molecules and we'll connect it up to make ATP, and then when we take off one of those P's again, that'll give us energy, okay? And that's how the creatine phosphate system works, and it happens really, really quickly, almost sort of, you know, not unnoticeable. You know, you will be out of breath, you'll be working hard, but we have to use it for these explosive type activities, and things like 100-metre sprint, shot put, weightlifting, high jump. Whenever we've got to be explosive and work for a short period of time, that's where the creatine phosphate system is going to be helpful for us. We also have the lactate system, okay? And what the lactate system does that takes the stored glycogen. So earlier on when we talked about carbohydrate and it being stored in the liver and stored in the muscles, what the lactate system does is it takes that and it uses that to create energy in the body, and it will provide ATP. So it's not like the creatine phosphate system. It won't kick in. It won't it's not for real explosive type work, because it lasts for maybe 1 to 3 minutes. But after those 1 to 3 minutes, it's all over and it's all gone. You can't use creatine phosphate for something that lasts 1 to 3 minutes, because it only lasts for 30 seconds, and that's when we'll use the lactate system. If we have something where we're working intensely for, maybe we're going for between 60 and 95% of our maximum effort, and we're going to be working for 1 to 3 minutes, we're going to use the lactate system, okay? And what happens with the lactate system is we take that glycogen that's stored in the muscles, we break it down into something called glucose. We then use the glucose to create ATP. That gives us energy, but there is a waste product, okay? And the waste product of the lactate system is something called lactic acid. And anyone who's ever done something like a 400-metre sprint, or you've done drop sets in the gym, okay? That's lactic acid. That pain and that burn in your muscles, that's lactic acid, and it is an acid. It makes the muscle become acidic, and we have to get rid of that waste product from the body. And that's why this system only lasts for 2 to 3 minutes, because after that we're cramped up and there's too much acid in the muscle for us to be able to continue to produce ATP. And the kind of activities that we'll use the lactate system for are the 400-metre run, 100-metre swim, 200-metre swim, hurdles potentially, anything where it's a sort of a 60 to 90% effort for 2 to 3 minutes. Finally, we've got our last system, which is the aerobic system. Aerobic means with oxygen. So this is the only system that relies on oxygen to be able to work. And what happens here is we're using carbohydrates and fats, but we're using them with oxygen as well. Okay, and the waste products here are carbon dioxide and water. So when we're breathing in and out, we're getting carbon dioxide out of the body, and our other waste product is water, which is secreted out of the body through the form of sweat. And the aerobic system is for long distance activities or endurance type activities that are going to take us a longer period of time. Stuff like a marathon, or even going for a 3 or 4 mile run, you know. Lactate system runs out after 2 or 3 minutes. It's going to take us longer than that to go on a 2 or 3 mile run. That's where the aerobic system kicks in, and it relies on the heart to keep delivering O2 or oxygen to the working muscles to be able to make more ATP. And if our heart isn't strong and if it can't keep getting oxygen to the muscles, then that's when we begin to break down, we can't create any more energy, and we get tired and we have to stop running or cycling or you know, whatever it might be. And let's have a look at how this system works. So it works for a long, long time, remember, okay? And it's taking O2, which we can get lots of oxygen, okay? We can always keep breathing in and out, and we can keep getting more oxygen. It takes fatty acids, which are stored in the body, and we have a lot of fatty acids stored in the body. And it's also taking glucose. So we need glucose, and glucose is stored in the lungs. It's not in the lungs, it's stored in the muscles and in the liver. We do have a limited supply of glucose, and that's why it's important in something like a marathon or a long distance cycle, is to keep eating, in particular carbohydrates, so that we can keep fueling the aerobic system. So what we use something called mitochondria. Mitochondria are really, really tiny, small parts of cells in the body, and this goes in, so oxygen, fatty acids and glucose goes in, and out comes carbon dioxide, ATP, which is our energy, and H2O, which is our waste product or sweat. Alright? And that's the way the aerobic system works. The aerobic system is pretty much limitless. As long as we don't run out of glucose or carbohydrate in its simplest form, we can keep using the aerobic system for a long time. Whereas the other systems, the CTP will work, the CP system will work very quickly, but it's over and done with really fast. The lactate system will last 30 to 90 seconds, but then it's gone, and then we need to rely on the aerobic system. But the aerobic system can't produce energy as quickly, alright? It's no good for explosive efforts, it's for long, steady efforts, okay? The lactate system is for more medium to high-paced efforts, and the CP is for very explosive type stuff. And because the aerobic system is for these long-distance activities, the type of stuff it lends itself to is long-distance running, marathon, triathlon, long-distance swimming, those sort of things where the heart rate is staying quite steady for long periods of time. That's where we can use the aerobic system, and we've probably touched on all of this. One thing I do want to mention is the muscle type fibres at the bottom. So the CP system, that's working with our type 2B fibres. Remember our real fast, big, strong, fast twitch fibres? Then the lactate is working with the type 2A, which are those ones that can go either way. They can be more similar to type 2B, they can be more similar to type 1 fibres. And then the aerobic energy system, that works with the type 1 fibres, those ones that are red because they have a rich blood supply. And here you can see, alright, just a diagram to really illustrate the points we've been talking about. Anything that's between 0 seconds to 3 seconds is using the creatine phosphate system, which is the blue line on the diagram, okay? And you can see we go up to 100, we use it all up, and then it dies down pretty much straight away. In the red, we've got the lactate system, and you can see that it's not slow to start off with, but it's only reaches its maximum at about 60 seconds, and then it will start to die off, and then it can produce maybe 25% of the energy that we need. It's not reliable. After 3 minutes, it can't keep going. So if we want to keep working more than 3 minutes, we have to use the aerobic. And as you can see, anything that's lasting more than 60 seconds to 3 minutes max, nearly all of the energy that we need has to be created by the aerobic system. The others are no good for those longer periods of time. Oh, gone too far. So that's the lesson over with. Hope it made sense. Replay it if you need to. Have a look at your notes if you need to. We only have one more presentation left at level 2 A&P, and that is on the life cycle of the bones. So go over, take a look at that, and then hopefully we should be getting ready for your exams. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you all again soon.